So now I'm going to make the tsoureki. So tsoureki is a Greek Easter bread. We're celebrating Greek Orthodox Easter this weekend. And I grew up with a step-grandmother her family was from Naupactus in Greece. And so I learned all of these wonderful traditions from her because she lived next door to us with my grandfather. So this is the dough for the tsoureki, and I absolutely love it because when you smell it, it's got cinnamon and nutmeg and mahleb, which is a kind of ground cherry kernels, and all of these wonderful flavors that just take you right back to Byzantium. And I love all this mixture of warm spices. It brings me right back to my childhood. We used to do this every Easter. And so I've got this dough, which is a kind of brioche-like dough. You can get the recipe from my blog. Just look up Greek Easter or tsoureki. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the dough and I'm going to roll it into a little bit of a log like this. And then what I need to do is make 3 kind of equal-sized pieces, and those are going to turn into equal-sized logs. So sometimes when I do this, and I only do it once a year, you get like a little bit rusty. So let me just make sure that these are kind of as even as possible. You could get really fancy and weigh them, but I don't. I usually just do something like this and kind of get them to be the same. So at Greek Easter, we would make a lot of these, and that way we would have them for all of the festivities. You know, by modern standards, it seems kind of weird to think about having bread on a holiday and it being such a big deal. So people wonder, like, why is this such an amazing thing to have these special breads? Why do the Italians, the Calabrese, the Sicilians, the people from Abruzzo and Molise and Campania, Lucania, a lot of places in Italy and then all over the Mediterranean have these special breads at their holidays? And the reason is that they used to be ceremonial breads in the ancient times. So what these breads, actually were breads which they would be offerings to the gods, because wheat was expensive. They used to tax wheat. They used to tax the milling of wheat since Roman times. And so this, ingredient that, of course, has been very much modified and very different in modern times, but something that, for the last 50, 60, 70 years in America, we've taken for granted, at one time was a luxury item. And so sugar was very hard to come by in the Mediterranean because they hadn't inherited it yet. And it was, to have a bread with a little bit of sugar in it and all this flour was amazing. Plus, people who were part of the Greek Orthodox tradition, and at those times even part of the Catholic tradition, couldn't eat eggs and dairy and things like that, meat, during all of Lent. So nowadays, a lot of people, they just think about Friday, like you think about Friday in a tradition of Catholicism, and people don't eat meat. But imagine 40 days or 55 days of not eating meat or dairy. And a lot of people in the Greek Orthodox tradition still do that today. So I'm just wetting my fingers because I feel like the dough is a little bit dry. So when you make bread, it's really interesting. It depends upon the ambient temperature in your home or in the professional bakery, wherever you're baking it. So like a lot of professional bakeries, they have those rooms kind of controlled with humidity, because the more humid it is, the more flour that you're going to need in your bread recipe. And the more dry it is, the more water you're going to need. So you can kind of always tell the temperature. Like even if I'm making this bread and it seems to be, it's a nice day, it's sunny, the forecast doesn't call for rain, but if my bread dough is requiring a lot more flour to come together, I'm like, okay, it's humid, it's going to rain at some point, and it usually does. So that's my ancient method for predicting the weather. But now what I want to show you is how to make this come together. And we're going to just kind of plate our tsoureki. So up at the top here, I'm pinching all of the top part together. And then I'm going to push these out to the side, right? And I'm just going to come over one over the center. And each one is going to come over the center. And I'm going to leave the sides out like this. So just keep going back and forth, one over the center, this way, and then this way. And what you're doing is, this is the way that my yaya did it. So yaya means grandmother in Greek, and that's what I called my Greek grandmother, just one over the other, and that way you get these beautiful little holes for the eggs. Now there are many different ways to make a tsoureki. Some people do it like challah is a round, some people do it with a double braid, a triple braid, and you know, any way that you want. But I grew up doing it this way, and so that's the one that I like. And we'll just bring it together like this, and it has this place for these 3 beautiful eggs. And now I'm going to bring over my baking sheet. I just put a little bit of parchment on it, and I'm going to tell you about the tradition of the eggs, in at least the Greek tradition. We know a lot of people know about them in the Christian tradition, but the story is actually much older than that. So I'm going to make this a little bit even, and then you can see this is the beginning of my beautiful tsoureki, and we'll put it down, and I'm going to put a lot of coverings on it. Now, a lot of times in my cooking class, I tell this story. My Nonna Angela, whenever she made bread, she would always put layers and layers of kitchen towels on it. If you look in modern cookbooks, they're going to tell you, you know, to just layer it with 1 kitchen towel. But in the olden days, they used lots and lots of them. So I get all of my kitchen towels, or several, and put them on top, because then it rises more quickly. No, it ensures that no drafts come. This one says amore, so I love it. I always put that one on top. But my Nonna Angela used to cover the bread with all of her different towels. And then when she was done with the clean kitchen towels, she would go to the cupboard in the bathroom and get the clean bath towels, and she would put those on top. And so they were like this big mound. And then she would put it on her bed, which was made in a big vat like this. And then she would put 1 wool coat. She would take it and she would put it over the top like this. And we always knew, whenever we saw that coat out, we knew that she was making bread. And it would be buried under this. And of course it would raise more quickly. You know, in the older days they used sourdough yeast, and some people still do today, which is a wonderful thing. And that took a little bit more time for it to rise. And so we have to let this rise for 1 hour. And then I'm going to talk to you about my eggs. So this is a beautiful little Greek bowl that I got in Rhodos in Greece, which I absolutely love. And you know, for the Italian Americans who are watching, a lot of the people who came from Greece and populated southern Italy, which wanted to make it part of Magna Graecia, they actually came from Rhodes. So we have a little bit of a history with them. And now the Greeks, they always do their eggs 1 color. It's this very deep red like this. You don't see any pastel pink or blue or teal or anything yellow like that in Greek eggs. It's always blood red. And because this to them represents the blood of Christ, and it also represents resurrection. So on my blog, it tells you how to do them 2 ways. The more modern way with food dye, or the old-fashioned way, which is more organic, and that's what I do now. So I'm going to show you how I did that. Basically, it's all about the skins of onions. So you take these skins of 15 onions and you peel them, and then you put them in a pot with 6 cups of water and a couple tablespoons of distilled vinegar. You bring that to a boil for 30 minutes, you turn it down, and then you put the eggs in, and you let them boil for 20 minutes, and then you turn it off and you let them sit. I let these sit overnight, and so that's how you do that. And then what you need to do is just polish the eggs. And so I use a little bit of my olive oil from Calabria. So this is a 100% Carolea olive from where my maternal grandparents come from in Calabria. And then you can see it has the Presidia of slow food. So it's a great quality, high phenolic, low acidic olive oil, and it just tastes like Magna Graecia. And so what I'm going to do with the olive oil is I just polish my eggs. And this is a very Greek thing. That's why you always see them polished like this. And then we're going to put them inside of our bread before we let it rise for an hour and before we bake it off. Look how beautiful they are. I just love that. To me, this color of red is just synonymous with the Greek Easter. So I'm going to put a little bit more. And there's also a game that the Greeks play with the eggs on Easter Sunday. And basically what you do is you have 2 people play together, and they stand next to each other, and one person holds the egg really strong, and looks at the other person and says, Christos anesti, which means Christ has risen. And then they take the egg and they hit the top like this really hard. They smash it. Then the other person looks back and does the same thing, and they say, alithos anesti, which means truly he has risen. And whoever stays with the egg intact wins. So it sounds silly, but it's a tradition. You know, these traditions are fun. They're healthy for us. They're good for our psyche. But they didn't start in Greece. These actually started with spring equinox festivals. In ancient Egypt, they used to have these games for a festival called Shem Nissim, which means the smell of the fresh breeze. And this is a festival that the ancient Egyptians would celebrate every year during the spring equinox, just like the Persian festival of Nowruz. And so what would happen during that time was all of these little games with the eggs, and also they used a lot the image of the hare or rabbit to represent longevity. So a lot of our modern and Christian Easter traditions were actually started in ancient Egypt and in ancient Iran. And so I think that's really interesting to, you know, just to think about how these things traveled through history. Nowadays in Egypt, they actually changed the holiday because there are a lot of Coptic Christians in Egypt. And during the 9th century, the Muslim Caliphate, who was ruling Egypt at the time, the Fatimids, saw that the Christians could not celebrate the Shem Nissim because it fell within their fasting period. So what they did was they actually changed the date. So now Easter Monday in Egypt is Shem Nissim. So I'll show you how to put these in my bread, and then we'll let it go to sleep for an hour. And when we come back, we'll bake off our beautiful tsoureki. Okay, so just kind of make a nice little nest around the egg. Make sure that you're pushing it in. Once it rises, you're not going to notice this anymore, but you just want to make sure that you give the eggs a nice little home. So here is our unfinished tsoureki, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's risen. So now our tsoureki has been rising for an hour. We can see how nice and beautiful it has really risen up. Look at that. It's gotten nice and puffy. We want it to be about doubled in size. That's perfect for this. And now we're going to make a glaze to go on top. So it's a traditional egg wash with just one egg. And what we're going to do is use the yolk of the egg to make our wash. We don't need the whole thing. And then as soon as we get the yolk ready, we can add in a little bit of honey. So this is a wonderful Greek addition. If you really want to get things nice and golden that you're making, always think about this Greek version of an egg wash, which is just the yolk and the honey together. And then we need about a teaspoon of water, not too much, just a little bit. But it will give us that beautiful golden finish that the tsoureki are known for, which I just love. This smells so fragrant right now. You can really smell the allspice and the cinnamon together. Anybody who's a fan of the cuisine of the Eastern Mediterranean, you know, they're wonderful spices to have. The spices that kind of Americans just use at Thanksgiving time and maybe Christmas time are used all throughout the year in this part of the world. And now I'm just going to brush this on my tsoureki. I've got the oven preheated to 350 degrees. That's all you need. But you want to make sure that it's nice and preheated. I'm using parchment paper for this, but you could just butter a baking sheet if you want to do it that way. And also pay attention to your baking sheets. You know, a lot of people, all the recipes just say baking sheets, and I definitely want you to be able to use what you've got at home, but they're not all equal. I mean, some baking sheets produce things that have a very light bottom, like the ones that are for cookies. They'll have hopefully a double cell in them to make a little bit more air, and that way the bottoms of the cookies don't burn, and I use those when I do like a lot of my Christmas cookies. But then for breads, you want something usually that's like a little bit darker and has a finish which is going to help to give you that really nice seal on the crust in your bread. That's what we like. So people decorate their tsoureki with all kinds of things. Some go all out and put gold leaf on it, which looks absolutely beautiful. And you can do that if you want to. I've never done gold leaf on mine, at least that I can remember in recent years. But this time, normally I just bake it like this. But this year, I had some pearl sugar left over because I was making colombe for the for the Italian Easter, the Easter bread that's in the shape of a dove, and we put this pearl sugar on top. So I thought, well, this would be great on the Tsoureki too. Some people do that. You want to make sure and do it right away, because as you can see, it has to really kind of adhere to the sides and adhere to the egg wash that you put on. So I just pick up any little remnants and leftovers. And I'm going to do some sliced almonds too, which are also traditional for the Tsoureki. A beautiful look, a nice added little Mediterranean flavor in there. And it just helps to make this a wonderful holiday bread. So this is our Tsoureki. It's ready for the oven. And I want to wish everybody a caldo Pascha. For those who aren't celebrating, a happy Sunday. And we'll see you next time.